"We're sorry, we can't take her." The woman's voice trembled as she looked at the tiny baby wrapped in a pink blanket. Her husband stood beside her, stiff and silent. The social worker frowned. "May I ask why?" The woman hesitated, glancing at the baby's dark skin, before whispering, "She's not what we expected." But weeks later, a single envelope landed in their mailbox, a DNA report that shattered everything they thought they knew. What was inside that envelope would expose secrets buried for decades, and force them to face the truth they'd spent their whole lives running from. Before the story begins, tell me, where are you watching from, and how late is it over there? For years, David and Claire Robinson had everything a couple could dream of: a sprawling suburban home, thriving careers, and a reputation for being the perfect family in their small Virginia town. Claire, a successful interior designer, loved posting photos of their polished lives online, while David, a corporate lawyer, often said, "Oh, we've built this from the ground up, we deserve it." But behind the perfect smiles was a quiet ache. They couldn't have children. After years of failed treatments, adoption felt like their final hope. So when the agency called to say a newborn girl was waiting for them, Claire burst into tears. "This is it, David," she whispered, clutching his hand. "Our family." They spent days preparing the nursery: soft pink walls, white crib, a name painted above it, Ella. Everything was ready. But when the social worker finally arrived with the baby, something in the air changed. Claire's smile faltered. David's jaw tightened. The baby wasn't what they imagined. Her skin was a soft brown, her curls dark and tight. "Is there a mistake?" David asked, his voice uneasy. The social worker shook her head. "No, this is Ella. She's perfectly healthy." "She's yours if you'll have her." Claire looked away, her heart pounding. We weren't told." They didn't sign the papers that day. Still, that night as Claire lay awake, the image of that little girl wouldn't leave her mind. Something deep inside whispered that she'd made a terrible mistake, one she'd soon have no choice but to face. Days turned into weeks, and the Robinsons tried to move on. Claire threw herself into work, while David avoided any mention of adoption altogether. But late at night, Claire would scroll through photos of newborns online, the emptiness in her chest growing heavier each day. Then one morning, a letter from the adoption agency arrived, an update about Ella. Against her own hesitation, Claire opened it. Inside was a photo, the same baby, now smiling in the arms of a foster mother. Something inside Claire twisted. She looked happy, but she should have been ours. David noticed the picture on the kitchen counter that evening. "Claire, don't start this again," he sighed, setting his briefcase down. "We made a decision." Claire looked up, tears in her eyes. "We didn't make a decision, David. We walked away." She wasn't. He stopped, biting his tongue. "Wasn't what?" Claire's voice trembled. "Wasn't wide enough for us?" David said nothing. The silence between them said it all. But fate has a strange way of forcing truth to the surface. 2 weeks later, the phone rang. It was the adoption agency again. "Mr. Robinson," the social worker said cautiously, "we had the DNA results from Ella's birth records verified. There's something you both need to know." When David hung up, his hands were shaking. "Claire, they want us to come in. It's about Ella." At the agency, the social worker handed them a sealed envelope. "We don't usually disclose this," she said softly, "but due to unusual matches in our database, we thought you'd want to see." David tore it open. His eyes scanned the first page, then froze. He read it again, and again. His face went pale. "David?" Claire whispered. He looked up slowly, voice breaking. "Claire, it says I'm related to her." Claire blinked in disbelief. "That's impossible. How could you—" He pushed the papers toward her. "It says I'm her biological father." The room went silent, except for the ticking clock on the wall. The social worker spoke gently. "It appears Ella's biological mother listed only a first name, but based on the DNA database and your prior college records, it's possible she's from a relationship you didn't know about." Claire's voice cracked. "So you're telling me that baby, and the one we refuse, is his?" David buried his face in his hands. "I didn't know. I swear, Claire, I didn't know." Claire stood trembling, anger and shock flooding her face. You refused your own child, David. The weight of those words hung heavy in the room. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, replaying every moment, the hesitation, the look on David's face, the silence when they'd said no. She finally whispered to herself, that baby didn't need saving. We did. And as the first light of morning crept through the curtains, Claire made a decision that would change everything, with or without David's approval. She was going to see Ella again. What she didn't know was that this visit would uncover something far more painful than the truth itself. Claire drove to the foster home with shaking hands, her heart pounding like it was trying to escape her chest. Rain tapped against the windshield, blurring the road ahead. She didn't know what she'd say, only that she had to see Ella. When the door opened, a kind woman in her 50s smiled. "You must be Mrs. Robinson. I was told you might come." She stepped aside. "Ella's in the living room." Claire stepped inside and froze. There she was, tiny curls, bright brown eyes, and a laugh that filled the room. Ella looked up at her and smiled without hesitation, like she knew her. "Hi," Claire whispered, her voice breaking. "You're even more beautiful than I remembered." Ella giggled, reaching out her arms. The foster mother smiled softly. "She doesn't do that with everyone. You must feel familiar to her." Claire knelt down, tears welling. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her hand trembling as she touched the little girl's fingers. "I should have never walked away." Behind her, the door creaked open. David stood there, soaked from the rain, his eyes red and tired. Claire turned, fury flashing through her tears. "You think you can just show up now?" David swallowed hard. "I had to. I needed to see her." He looked at Ella, and in that instant his face changed. The tough lawyer, the man who cared about appearances, gone. What was left was a father seeing his child for the first time. He fell to his knees beside Claire. "I didn't know, Claire. But now that I do, I can't lose her again." The room went silent except for Ella's soft cooing. Claire looked at him, then at the child who connected them in a way neither could deny. In that moment, the storm outside thundered, but inside something began to break apart too. The lies, the fear, the prejudice. Claire whispered, almost to herself. "We refused her because of her skin, and she turned out to be ours all along." David's tears fell freely now. Maybe this is the world's way of teaching us who we really are, but the world wasn't done teaching them yet. Months passed, and the Robinsons' home didn't look the same anymore. The once flawless white walls were now covered in drawings and fingerprints. Ella's world had filled every quiet corner. Claire would laugh when she found crayons on the couch, and David, once too busy for anything that wasn't work, now spent his evenings reading bedtime stories in a voice that sometimes cracked with emotion. But behind those small, beautiful moments lived a deeper truth, a guilt that didn't fade easily. One evening, as Ella slept peacefully, Claire looked at David and whispered, "Do you ever think about that day? The day we said no?" David nodded slowly. "Every single day. It's the moment that showed me who I was, and who I don't ever want to be again." They began to speak publicly about their experience, not to be applauded, but to be accountable. At a local adoption event, Claire stood before a room full of couples and said, her voice trembling, "We almost lost the greatest gift of our lives because of the color of her skin." Racism doesn't always wear a hateful face. Sometimes it hides behind words like, "not what we expected." There was silence, then quiet applause. Some cried, some looked away, but everyone felt something shift. Ella would grow up one day to learn the truth, not just about her parents' mistake, but their change, the day they chose love over prejudice. Because sometimes life gives you a second chance, not to erase your past, but to face it. As the camera fades, Claire's voice echoes softly, "We didn't save her. She saved us from the ignorance we didn't even know we carried." And maybe that's the question this story leaves behind. How many hearts are still saying no to love, simply because it doesn't look like what they expected? If this story touched you, share it. Let's keep talking about the change that starts inside us.